welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. We have two special additions to the 2019 Folk Art Calendar Blanket for the month of October. We're going to be making a little garden full of sunflowers and a pumpkin patch. In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to make the sunflowers. In the other tutorial, we're going to show you how to make the pumpkins, and we've linked that one in the description box down below. Remember, we're using the same yarn size and the same hook size that we've been using all along for this blanket project. For me, that's an acrylic size 4 medium weight yarn. We're going to make our little sunflowers in two different pieces. So the flower first and then the stem with the leaf. And there's not as much sewing involved as you think there might be. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table and we will stitch up a little garden full of sunflowers together. We're going to make these really cute little sunflower appliques today. We're making them in two pieces, so there's the sunflower part and there's the tall stem with the leaf part. You're going to want yellow, brown, and green yarn. Acrylic size 4 medium weight is what I've been using all along for this project, but you want to use the same yarn that you've been using for the rest of your calendar blanket. You don't need very much yarn for each of the colors for each of these appliques, but for all 5 you want approximately 10 grams or 25 yards of brown, 20 grams or 50 yards of green, and 40 grams or 90 yards of yellow. You want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and the hook we're using is the same one. It's a 5.5 millimeter, also known as an I or a 9 in the US, a size 5 in the UK. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, click that button and the bell so you never miss another episode. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. Please visit our shop and purchase a pattern. It helps support our show, and we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below. We're going to start with the very center of our sunflower. So I recommend using a nice dark brown, but for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to be using beige today so you can see what I'm doing. So grab your brown or the center color for the middle of your sunflower. We're going to begin with a cinch circle. So we're going to make a loop, pass our hook through it, grab our working yarn, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and chain 1, and that secures our cinch circle. Into our cinch circle, we're going to single crochet 8 times. So 8 single crochet into the cinch circle. Make sure you're working over top of that short tail so we can cinch our circle shut. Once you have 8 single crochet worked into your cinch circle, grab that short tail, cinch it up nice and tight, and we're going to join with a slip stitch to the first single crochet we made. Now we're going to actually be sewing the flower down to our blanket using the brown tail of the center of our flower. So you want to leave yourself a nice long tail, maybe 8 inches. You're going to fasten off. That's it for the center. Now you can grab your yellow for the petals. We're going to take our yellow yarn and make a slip knot. We're going to join our yarn in that stitch here right before our little fastened off knot. So right next to our fastened off knot, we're going to join our yarn with a slip stitch, and we're going to make our first petal right here. So we're going to chain 2. We're going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, and then we're going to slip stitch right back into the same place that we joined our yarn. All right. Take that long tail you left behind and make sure you've got it out of the way. I'm going to work over top of my other little short tails, but you can leave them to the back and weave them in later if you like. That can be easier for some folks. So make sure you get your long working tail out of the way, that brown one. Now, the next thing we want to do is use the same little place that we fastened off our yarn in, so where we slip stitch to join. So it's not technically it's stitched, it's kind of like a false stitch. We're going to slip our hook right in there, So instead of having 8 petals all the way around, we're going to have 9. So we're using that little space because we don't want any spaces in between our petals. So right into the stitch where you fastened off your brown, you're going to slip stitch. So slip stitch into it. Get all my little tails out of the way. And make a petal. Chain 2. Slip stitch back into the second chain from the hook. And slip stitch back into the same place that you started from. So every little petal starts and finishes in the same stitch. All right, the rest of them are pretty easy. You can sort of see the rest of your stitches, so there should be 7 of them there. Slip stitch into the next stitch. Chain 2. Slip stitch back into the second chain from the hook. And slip stitch into the anchor, so right back into the same place that you started your petal in. So petals all start and finish in the same stitch. You're going to do that all the way around. You're going to have 9 petals at the end of this row. So you slip stitch into the next stitch, chain 2, slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, and slip stitch back into the same stitch along the center of your flower. And that's it. I'll see you after a few more petals. Once you've worked that little petal repeater all the way around, you'll have 9 petals. You're just going to slip stitch back into the very same place that you joined your yellow yarn to begin with, and that completes the petal part of your flower. You don't need very much yarn. You can just snip your yarn, fasten off, make sure that's a nice tight knot, and then you're going to take a moment, get that brown long tail out of the way, and you're just going to weave your short tails in around the back of your flower. So just take a moment to get them out of the way. And don't worry, they're not going to show because we're going to be sewing this down to our blanket. So just get them out of the way. So that's our little sunflower made. You can just sort of pinch and pull out all the little petals so that you've got them all evenly positioned around the center of your flower, and all of the little bits are woven in around the back and just out of the way, and you've got that long brown tail left so that you can sew your flower to your blanket. Let's move on to the stem. Our stem is made all in one go, so it consists of a stalk and a leaf all built at the same time. I'm going to demonstrate using a lighter green so you can see what I'm doing. We're going to take our green, we're going to make a slip knot, and we're going to chain 11 to begin. Once you have 11 chains, we're going to skip the first chain, slip stitch into the second chain from the hook, slip stitch into each of the next 3, so this will be 4 slip stitches in total before we get to the base of our leaf. So that's 4 slip stitches. This chain here that we've just slip stitched into is going to be the anchor for our leaf. So from here, we're going to chain 4. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook, slip stitch into the second chain, and we're going to single crochet into each of those last 2 chains in this little tiny leaf we're making here. So single crochet in those last 2 chains. So a leaf consists of slip stitch, single crochet, and then that little anchor there where we started that chain, we're going to slip stitch right back into it to anchor our leaf to the stalk of our sunflower. That leaves you with 6 chains up the rest of the stalk. You're just going to slip stitch into each one of them. When you get up to the top, you can sort of pull on your stalk a little bit, fold your little leaf out, leave yourself a long tail, about 8 inches or so. Fasten off, and don't worry about this short tail, you're actually going to use it as a little knotting device when we go to apply our stems to our blanket. Our sunflowers are going to sit on the right side of our blanket. So here's the right edge of the blanket. It's just below our forest, so there's the bottoms of my trunks up there. Here's my little tractor over here. Just a couple of little mushrooms that I've stuck in and around the edge of my forest, but we're going to have our little patch of sunflowers over here on the right side. So I've already put my other 5 sunflowers into place. I have them arranged so that there's 3 kind of along the edge of the transition between the dark green and the light green, and then 2 situated in between them. So I recommend you lay all of your flowers down first. Make sure you've got them laid out the way you want them to be. Start by sewing down the stem first, then the flower on top. And you're going to do 1 flower at a time, and you're going to start at the ones that are furthest to the back or the furthest up your blanket. This way, if there's any kind of overlapping that needs to happen to the flowers that sit further down the blanket, you will have already sewn the ones up top down. So start with these ones, sew down the stem first, then the flower, then move to the next flower. I've already sewn down 4 of them, and I'm just going to show you how the 5th one goes. You're going to start with the stem, thread up that long tail you left, and just like every other piece that we've added to this blanket, we're going to sew it using the top facing loops of our blanket stitch and the edge of the actual applique. So here it is a little closer. There's a top facing blanket stitch loop. There's the edge of my applique. I'm just going to pick up an edge loop, not the whole stitch, because this is sort of a small slip stitch little piece. And then you can pin your little piece down into position if you want, or if you're like me, you can just kind of keep holding it, repositioning it as you go, and making sure it doesn't move around on you too much. Now, because this is a very small little piece, you don't have to do every single edge stitch. You can do every other edge stitch. So pick up a loop that is next to a loop edge, a couple stitches down, hold the top, and pull gently on your sewing thread, and that will help keep your little sewing stitches from looking too bulky or showing through. So just use every other stitch edge on your applique. Work your way around the entire stem, and I'll catch up with you at the top. Once you get all the way around the edge of your stem, you can take out your needle. Take those 2 ends, the long one and the short one, and just knot them together a couple of times. And this will hopefully keep them from unraveling. So knot them a couple of times and then trim any excess. And you're just going to stuff this under the center of your flower. And you're going to have it sort of trapped underneath your flower as you sew around your flower. So let's do that next. Now you want to thread up the brown tail left on your flower. You're going to position your flower so that it overlaps the top of your stem, and those little tails are sort of trapped underneath your flower. And now we're going to do a kind of a neat thing. We're going to leave the little petals so that they just sort of sit up like a little bit of interesting texture. You don't actually have to sew down your petals. And I hear a big sigh of relief from everyone out there. You're just going to be sewing down the underside of the brown section of your flower. So what you want to do is peel back your flower and look for these little sets of loops underneath each petal. So these little sets of loops are what connect your petals to the base of your flower, or the center of your flower. You're going to pick up a loop of your blanket, so top facing loop, and you're going to run your needle through those 2 loops that sit underneath your flower's petals. Reposition your flower as necessary. Find the next set and a loop that sits pretty much beneath it. And you're sewing always sort of in the same way, the same direction. So there's the next 2 loops. I'm going to use, I'll use a piece of the stem. There we go. And you're just going to do that all the way around. So you'll be going under 9 sets of loops underneath each of those petals, and that's how you're going to sew your little flower down to your blanket. Once you get all the way around the underside of your little flower, you're just going to grab a loop, any loop underneath that flower, and make a little knot. Make it as tight as possible. Then you're going to take your yarn and you're going to bring it up from underneath your flower inside the edge between the yellow and the brown. And you're just going to weave that brown tail in underneath some of those stitches. I like to go all the way around, actually, in one direction or the other. All of those little brown stitches in the center, and that will help kind of give your flower center a little bit more of a pop, a little bit more texture. So it pops out a little bit from the blanket, makes it a little three-dimensional. So just gradually work your tail all the way around underneath those brown stitches from row 1 of our flower. And once you've gone around, oh, say 1.5 times, you can trim the edge. And that's our little garden of sunflowers planted. These are so sunny and happy. I get a great big grin on my face when I look at them. I hope you enjoyed making this little garden full of sunflowers along with us today, and we will see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week, everybody. Bye!
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.